Covering the acquittal of former President Donald Trump of charges that he incited the deadly insurrection at the U.S. Capitol on January 6th. After 5 days of proceedings, only 7 Republicans crossed party lines with the guilty vote. Despite voting to acquit, Republican Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell, once considered a strong ally of the former president's, still criticized him sharply for his words and his actions.
Former President Trump's actions preceded the riot were a disgraceful dereliction of duty. The House accused the former president of, quote, incitement. That is a specific term from the criminal law. Let me just put that aside for a moment and reiterate something I said weeks ago. There's no question, none, that President Trump is practically and morally responsible for provoking the events of the day.
All right, joining us now is CBS News political contributor and Democratic strategist Antjuan Seawright. We also have founding partner of Protean Public Affairs and former RNC spokesman Kevin Sheridan. Good to see you both. So, Kevin, let me start with you. We just heard Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell condemning former President Trump, but also voting to acquit. What sort of balancing act does the Republican Party find itself in during this post-Trump era? I don't know if you heard my conversation with Molly Hooper and Liz Landers in the last segment, but I was trying to figure out if there's a greater sort of plan at play here for McConnell.
I think Mitch McConnell perfectly encapsulates that tension that's going on in the Republican Party right now, and he's not going to make any Democrats happy with his vote to acquit, but it's an important marker that he laid down in condemning Trump's actions on January 6th and the 2 months before that. And I think it's obviously because of the riot at the Capitol and that awful day, but it's also because of Trump's, his actions in Georgia to lose the Senate for Mitch McConnell. And there's nothing Mitch McConnell wants more than to be a majority leader. And he lost it, primarily because of Trump, I think he blames. So, look, he's going to – the McConnell speech today, I think, opens up space for candidates and senators and members of the House going into 2022 to speak freely about where they place the blame for January 6th and the loss of Georgia. Now, the 30% of the party is never going to leave Donald Trump. That's an important constituency, but these primaries are going to get fought out pretty quickly. You're going to start seeing Wyoming and potentially in some other places where Trump candidates will be primarying people who have been critical of Donald Trump.
And what of those Republicans, Kevin, who did ultimately cross party lines, does the majority of the GOP, just forget the Senate for just 1 second, just the Republican Party on the whole, do they believe that former President Trump is guilty of insurrection, even if they, because I'm curious, Kevin, you probably know the answer to this better than I do. If there were a secret vote, what do you think the outcome would have been?
I think you would have gotten 67 for sure. Look, they don't want to go against their voters, and you can criticize Republicans for that. I think all politicians are somewhat captive to their voters, but I think, we're going to see where these profiles in courage wind up. If they win their primaries and they win re-election, that's a real test to the theory that the Trump base can't be tangled with, and we're going to see it play out in real time. And a lot depends on what the Trump family does going forward, and we just don't know if they're going to. Donald Trump Jr. was saying he was going to, seek out primary challengers for anybody who certified the election results. Now, if that really happens, if he goes out and does that, he's declaring civil war on the party, and we'll see if they have the juice to do it.
Antjuan, my brother, just hang on 1 second. I'm going to get you in this, but I just have one more question just based off what Kevin just said, which I think is really interesting. Kevin, are you hearing from Republicans that they're concerned that if one of President Trump's children decide to run for office, if the president himself decides to run in 4 years, that the very same language that the president used against Democrats, he will use against them. You're already seeing it when you got the likes of Matt Gaetz going after a staunch. Does anybody believe that Liz Cheney is a rhino? Does anybody believe that Liz Cheney is somehow, a secret liberal or a secret socialist? Like, the Trumps have proven that when they don't like you or when you are in their way, they will use whatever means necessary to get you out of the way. So the same language, rigged, lying, remember lying Ted, little Marco, I mean, that stuff's going to come back. So the fact that Trump still remains relevant in the Republican Party, is that a concern? Not for Democrats, because if Democrats continue doing what they're doing, what they did in Georgia, for example, they're in a good position. But is it more problematic for Republicans?
Well, yeah, I mean, this is a big problem for Republicans. We just don't know what Donald Trump is going to ultimately do, what his family is going to do, what his big, the Trump acolytes like Matt Gaetz, how much juice they actually have. He whipped up a crowd pretty quickly in Liz Cheney's, front yard, but whether or not he can actually, whether the Trumps can win that primary challenge against Liz Cheney. She's an extremely popular figure in Wyoming. At least she was before that vote. But we'll see. She's got to go back to her voters. She's got to explain her vote. She's got to explain her reasons. She's articulate. She's smart. She's driven. I think she will win, but it's not going to be easy. This is a tough vote that these guys took.
All right, Antjuan. Given this acquittal, and given that the writing was on the wall even before the trial took place, do you think that the presentation and the argument that the House managers made was enough not to convict President Trump? Because clearly the evidence was there, but did they, at the very least, give the American people a sense of what happened and who was responsible? And I say that ultimately may be their lasting legacy, that it is on the record, the evidence is on the record, the video evidence, that phone call that transpired between the minority leader and the president, where he said that those people who were already in the halls of Congress, who were already beating police officers with American flag poles and baseball bats and spraying them with bear spray, that he was responsible for that. And that's in the record. And no, they didn't get a conviction. It is there for posterity, for legacy, for history, for all of time.
I think the House impeachment managers did a damn good job of making the case, and that's what this was all about. Look, we knew going into this how this was likely going to turn out, but minus the House leadership having the courage to bring forth an impeachment vote, and minus a bipartisan effort in the House, some of the stuff that's now into the bloodstream forever would have never perhaps been seen or viewed by the American people, Democrats and Republicans. And so, as Fantasia says, Vlad, sometimes you have to lose to win again. Yes, we did not per se have a win today from a conviction standpoint, but I think we had a win in terms of now the American people can fully understand the gravity around what happened on the Capitol that day and the responsibility that's wrapped around Donald Trump and his allies, because the people who did not vote to convict him are just as guilty as he is in all of this. And the fact of the matter is the party of law and order, the party that claims patriotism, and the party that claims they love this country did not demonstrate that in their vote. And as I said earlier, this is a prime example of a true miscarriage of justice, because in any courtroom, in any scenario around the country, you and I both know what the conviction would have been. And I remind my Republican friends, in particular those who may have voted voted not to convict the president today, can you imagine, Vlad, what the response would have been if that was a Democrat in the office of the presidency doing what Donald Trump did and knowing that he lied and people died? Can you imagine what the response would have been for the Republicans? And for every Republican senator and for every Republican who say this is not a big deal, just picture yourself in the same posture if it were the Democrats. And I think that is what they're going to have to look themselves in the eyes and have to live with for the rest of their lives.
Yeah, I mean, look, there are still some members in that chamber who voted to convict President Bill Clinton during his impeachment trial for something that, you know, a lot of Americans look back on right now and don't feel rises to the level, at least, of what this former president, Donald Trump, was accused of committing, inciting an insurrection. So, Antjuan, the question again, I asked Kevin this about the future of the Republican Party. Given the fact that Donald Trump remains, if anything, what this vote has proven is that former President Trump has a vice-like grip on the Republican Party. And given that he's still free to run again for office, given that he's still a player in Republican Party politics, does that mean that Democrats probably, you know, there was a sense from some that if he had been convicted, if he had been found guilty and he was removed from the political equation, that Democrats might become complacent. But now that he's still out there, his supporters are still out there, he is still out there, does that mean that Republicans, that actually gives Democrats more of an urge to fundraise, more of an urge to get people out there to vote, especially as the midterms near and, of course, in 4 years?
Well, I'll say this, Vlad. I'll say that, and I wrote this in an op-ed piece a few weeks ago, just because Donald Trump has left does not mean the things that came along with Donald Trump has left the Republican Party, American politics, or this country. In fact, after votes like today, there is a greater license or a greater urge for these people to continue behaving like they are, like they have been, because they figured out now there's no real punishment or repercussions to their behavior. And so just because Trump is not in office does not mean his power grip on the Republican Party will go away. But what we do know is there's very limited oxygen in any political room. And if the Republicans decide to continue to be the party of Donald Trump, look, I'm happy about that, because guess what? The party of Donald Trump is the party we defeated in November. And that's why we have President Joe Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris, a majority in the House and the majority in the Senate. They will decide who ultimately they want to be when they grow up. But here's what I do know. Donald Trump has been and can be a motivating factor for Republicans, but he can be a damn good motivating factor for Democrats as well. And so if the Republicans choose to take that route, then so be it. I think we will use that to our advantage, but I also think that Democrats have a responsibility now that we have the majority and the White House to govern and not just talk about Donald Trump, but to talk about what we are doing, what we're going to do, and what we will do when we have the control of the thermostat.
Antjuan Seawright, Kevin Sheridan, thank you both. Appreciate it.